Okay, welcome everybody. I wanted to kind of get started right away because I know you guys are joining us from your lunchtime. We really appreciate that. Today we're going to have Alexandra Roark talk to us about the impact of video gaming on the brain. And we've partnered with her before at Smart Families, and she has spoken to Village Middle School parents at a coffee. So you might be kind of familiar with her, and if you're not, she is the assistant director and therapist at Houston Neuroscience Brain Center. And we're just so excited to have her to talk to us about this information that is really important for us to be learning as we are walking and navigating raising our kids in the digital world. So I'll hand it over to her.
Thank you for that. Yes, I'm Alexandra, and then I'm here with Dr. Ron Swatsina. He's our director. He's also an expert on the brain and video gaming, and so he'll be able to give his expertise and help answer questions too. I'm just really excited to hear that y'all are interested in this already, especially for your kids at such a young age, because now you're really able to set them up for success. And so I'll be talking a lot today about the impacts on the brain and the body throughout the developmental period. And I know y'all are really interested in me speaking on like Minecraft and Roblox, so I'm going to integrate that in too, and I'll make sure to leave time for questions. Um, I'm with Houston Neuroscience Brain Center, where we do EEGs. So we look for electrical biomarkers that can account for people's symptom of anxiety, depression, um, ADD, and we work with brain injury, cognitive decline, and then we offer neurofeedback that can help. It's a type of brain training that can help reduce those symptoms, and we also offer red light therapy for the brain and talk therapy. And I'll speak to our services and how that can um, be a collaboration with video gaming later. So, first of all, let's look at the stats. I came across these statistics about 2 weeks ago and I was like, okay, I have to add these to the presentation because they just blew me away. So first of all, whenever we're looking at the average hours per week, teenage boys average about 34 hours per week of video gaming. Just let that sink in for a little bit. Like that is almost a full-time job. And then 63% of male college students are just a little bit below that at 30 hours per week. Heavy gaming has been affiliated with lower life satisfaction in teens. And then there's a report that 15% of young men report having no close friends, which, as we get into video games in a little bit, we can almost assume that there is a strong correlation with video gaming. But why are these video games so appealing? 30 to 34 hours per week is a lot. So, video games are designed to be addictive. The creators of these games, they know what they're doing. They're going to the research. They are going to psychology and figuring out what do we need to do to make these people stay on this game as long as possible. And I was reading something the other day that video games from when I was little are so different from video games now. I think about the games I would play. You would be playing the scene and the background would be consistent, and then you would just have this little figure moving around and you would move it, and like, other things would be coming in. And then typically games would have an end, whereas games nowadays, a lot of them don't ever have an end. You can just keep playing them and keep playing them. And then the lights, the scenes are changing almost every second, the sounds. I had someone who was wanting me to play a video game with them a couple years ago, and I was like, okay, like let's go for it. And I sat down and there was so much going on. I was like, I can hardly think straight or know what to do. And so I just had to give up because my brain wasn't used to that kind of stimulation. And so then we had to think about dopamine. So whenever we're playing these games, we're getting a release of dopamine, which is your reward. It's telling your brain, we like doing this, let's keep doing this. And it leads to a cycle of prolonged play. And so as the gamer's tolerance builds, they need more and more gaming time to experience the same level of enjoyment. And so you can see right here in this graph, a typical dopamine rewarding event and end goes like that. But then whenever it starts to go into addiction, the baseline is shifted up and then the crash is heavier. Then we look at boys versus girls. So it is common to know that boys play more video games than girls. Girls are actually coming closer and closer, but this could be from the testosterone and the dopamine. It has been shown that men release more dopamine compared to girls. Then there's also the impact of testosterone, which is linked to impulsivity. Then I wanted to show this graph about dopamine. So apparently on the normal day, the brain produces around 50 nanograms per deciliter per day. 100 on a really good day. Maybe you're going to Disney World that day or something. And here on the graph, you can see foods right there around 100. You eat a really yummy meal, you're getting that dopamine. And then video gaming actually produces more dopamine than sex. And look at where it is next to cocaine. So these players are getting some big hits of dopamine. And so now as we talk about the impacts of gaming, I want to highlight that, there's always a balance with everything in life, right? There are some positive impacts of gaming. I mean, that's why people do it so much. So let's look into what they are. Research has shown that games like Minecraft support planning and strategizing skills. Video games are even used to enhance hand-eye coordination, which is useful in careers like aviation. Aviation careers will use that. Then there's the social connection piece. These games do offer a sense of community, especially for isolated children. Maybe the kids don't have opportunities to go out and do things after school, or we think about times during COVID where we couldn't see our friends and our family. And so this is another positive impact. Then we have to think about escapism. These games provide a mental break from stress and anxiety in kids and teens. Kids, they go through a lot at school. Whether they may be getting bullied or experiencing rejection, maybe there's life events that are causing them to feel lonely or depressed, the anxiety that can come on from being stressed. We have to always realize with younger kids and teenagers, a lot of their life is controlled. They don't get to make a lot of life decisions. They're being told what to eat, when to wake up, when to go to bed, that they have to go to school, that they have to do this. And stress and a sense of control are highly correlated with each other. And so if kids really don't feel like they have control in video games, they do. And that can feel very freeing for them. And so, I even like to sometimes after work just go and watch some Netflix and not think about anything. And, in some ways that kids will want to do this too with their video games. But let's look on the other side, when things will turn negative. Those skills that they're learning in the video games, whether it's the hand-eye coordination, the planning skills, they don't always translate to real life. Are they going to be aviators? Are they going to be contributing to real life where they will even have the opportunity to use those skills? Video games, they teach instant gratification instead of delayed gratification. In life, to be successful, in order to graduate, in order to do hard things, we have to learn how to live off of delayed gratification, knowing that something is coming in, to have that discipline to stick with it. But with the video games, everything is so instant in this world, that you might have heard they call it the microwave generation, where we want everything now. It's going to ingrain the instant gratification into them, where they don't care about the delayed gratification. It seems too much. It seems too overwhelming. It seems too far away. Then with the social skills, while it offers a sense of community, it can also hinder communication skills. Like, here I put nonverbal communication skills. They're not, when they are, saying these things to the people on the other side, they're not seeing how their words impact them. They're not seeing the facial expressions when they say hurtful things or when there's sarcasm. And then you may already be familiar with this, but how gamers often talk to each other online in Roblox and these shooter games, they can be very harsh, very derogatory, critical, inappropriate. And the more and more kids experience this kind of language, it is going to be normalized to them. They're going to see that as normal, and they're going to go and speak like that to people in real life. Just this week, I was talking to one of my close friends, and she has a 12-year-old, and she is really good at putting those parental restrictions on all the devices. But she missed the PS5 because he didn't play the PS5. Well, recently he picked up the PS5, and it wasn't too long after that where she started getting reports from other parents that he picked up a very colorful, derogatory word and was using it quite frequently. And so now she's having to have that conversation with him because that word was normalized, and he thought that that's just something that people say in the real world when he can't. Um, During this development stage, especially whenever your kids get to the 12 to 18 range, they are going through what Eric Erickson calls the identity versus role confusion. They are going to be using their social circles, trying out different social circles, different things to form their identity. Otherwise, if they aren't able to do this, they are going to be in a stage of role confusion. And they need to get that identity in order to go to the next stage of life. The thing is if they are stuck in their online world, they are going to be developing their identity based off of what they're experiencing and the people who are basically investing in their lives and modeling to them. And so if you aren't able to put these restrictions on who they're talking to in these games like Roblox, then you're basically letting these strangers who are often saying inappropriate things mold your child. And so since, your children are younger, this is the perfect time to start putting those restrictions on devices and on games, because it's always harder to do it later on. Like if you give them free access and then you're like, so we're actually going to scale back now, it's going to be so much easier if you just set it up now. And I'm not going to go into it too much in this presentation, but I'd be happy to talk to anyone about it, is how to have those conversations with your kids about your value system and how video games impact the brain, how the social interactions impact your social skills and the values of your family, and why the restrictions are there. And because this is the whole stranger aspect plays a big part of this. I am not super familiar with Roblox because I've only played it a few times, but I was doing some research for this presentation. And so I reached out to my friends and their teenagers who play. And so I got a lot of feedback. And apparently Roblox is setting up some things to help with age restrictions, where you can like scan your face to help them determine your age, or you have to give an ID. But still, I was talking to a 19-year-old, and she said that the things that you're exposed to in these groups with these strangers, she said that there's like hardly any games that aren't, you know, child appropriate. And she was saying that with the things that she's witnessed on Roblox, she would not let her kids play if she had kids. And so that was really interesting to hear. So, and then again with balance, I can't say that all of Roblox is bad, but I'm just saying you really have to monitor what your kids are doing in order to make sure that they're being safe. Moving on to the escapism gone wrong. So, escapism can be a coping skill that they need. We all need to just zone out for a little bit. But if kids are only using video games or screens to escape, then they aren't given any opportunities to learn coping skills that are going to help them for real life stressors. We can't just rely on video games to be our coping tool. That is ultimately going to lead us to failure. Then the desensitization to violence. And so this is where I'm going to start talking about the shooter games. And it's actually even beyond shooter games now, because some Roblox games are incredibly violent without the shooting. And Dr. Ron actually introduced me to this book. It's called On Killing, where a lieutenant colonel wrote this book explaining how the military uses video games to increase the shooting rates in their army, and it helps them get over the fear of pulling the trigger.
Very true. Military has looked at this for years because the Civil War, for instance, so many guys were found with their muskets full of bullets that they loaded and loaded and loaded. They could never pull a trigger on another human being, and it's in our basic programming. But by deprogramming these kids to pull the trigger on another human being, even through a video game, has increased the military's ability to know that when put into battle, their soldiers are going to actually pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so research even like since his book has shown that these games reduce empathy and increase violent behaviors. And so we have to accept this. And like we can say, oh no, we're fine, we can handle this. Kids, their frontal lobes are not fully developed. So they are not able to assess adult content like we are. So now let's switch over to executive functioning deficits in gamers. Let's talk about what's actually happening in the brain of these kids, these teens who are playing excessive video games, and how that's going to impact their behaviors. So the research shows excessive gaming is linked to ADHD symptoms. We see this at our clinic with EEGs. A neuroplasticity is impacted by overstimulation and weakens functional brain pathways, and it increases theta waves in their frontal lobes. So this is going to lead to poor time management, poor impulse control, and difficulty focusing. And so whenever like you're asking about the differences in the games, I talk to parents and explain that the games that are requiring your kids to have this intense level of focus, where you may come in and say like, hey, have you finished your homework? Or hey, it's time for dinner. And like maybe they don't even hear you, or they barely even respond because they can't look away for 1 second because maybe it'll mess up their game. Those are the kind of games that are really going to cause that excess theta in their frontal lobes that are going to start to rewire the brain for ADHD. And so to explain this more, whenever your brain is overstimulated, so they're locked in, there's all of this stuff going on. Like I told you before, like whenever I was playing this game, I could hardly handle it, and my eyes could barely keep track of all the stuff going on, whereas the person I was playing with, it didn't even bother them. The difference is that their brain started to increase that frontal theta as a protective, like a defense mechanism almost for the brain, so that the brain can start to tolerate all of that overstimulation. And so then what happens is you take that person who, has rewired their brain with games and put them in a setting like school, where then they're forced to have to listen to a teacher who's, there's just a whiteboard maybe, or maybe they have screens now in school. I don't know. But still, it's usually pretty boring compared to games, right? Even if the kid really wants to pay attention and is trying really hard, their brain is basically working against them. They are going to have the hardest time paying attention because of how their brain is wired. Then there's the fight or flight part too. Whenever you're playing these games that have your heart racing, that, like maybe maybe it's a timed game, maybe you have to cross the finish line. And so your brain, your body is going into this fight or flight response. And so I don't know if y'all are familiar with this, but it's a nervous system activation where your body is trying to, you know, um, get the deed done. So your heart is racing, your palms are getting sweaty, your muscles are tensing. Those are all signs that you are in a fight or flight response. Whenever and we're going to go into our fight or flight response. Um it's something that happens with us, but what happens when we are in our fight or flight consecutively for hours on end, then that's going to have an impact on your heart rate variability, on your immune responses. It has your body pumping out all of these stress chemicals way longer than it needs to, and that is having a lasting effect on your body. Studies into video games show an increased violent behavior specifically, or just anger. Violent behaviors, and sexist behaviors too, actually, to answer that question. And so this fight or flight response leads me into what I want to talk about next, which is interoception. Interoception is the awareness of body signals like hunger, thirst, pain, and fatigue. And this is a skill that I try to work with all of my therapy clients just in general, because as we can gain awareness for our bodies, it's goes into emotional intelligence, actually, because you can understand, oh, I'm feeling my anxiety here, I'm feeling my stress here. That means, I can use this coping skill to help address the need. With gamers, all of those body signals are going to be turned off, especially if they're in their fight or flight, because when your body goes into fight or flight, it's not wanting to think about if you have to go to the bathroom or if you're hungry, because evolutionary wise, our body does that as if we're trying to run away from the bear to like protect us, to save us. And then gamers often just choose to ignore those because they don't want to go to sleep whenever they're trying to get the dopamine hit. With our excessive gamers who are coming in for therapy here, they'll come in, they got bags under their eyes, as they stayed up all night playing video games. Either they're not eating at all or they're mindlessly eating, not taking care of hygiene, and they're ignoring their emotional cues. So then let's think the long term. Your kids are young now, but if they get on this cycle, if they get in this like learned behavior, what we've seen with the teens who engage in the excessive video game playing, that are on the addiction side of things, they become what we call failure to launch. So that means their whole high school years, they've wired their brain to have ADHD. They're not learning their critical thinking skills, time management. The parents often are, doing everything for them because the gamers aren't interested in learning how to do their laundry or the dishwasher or how to cook for themselves, or personal hygiene. And then they turn 18, they go off to college, and then they're just expected to, succeed. Um, their social skills are purely in the online world. So then they go off to college where they're having to interact more on their own. They're not dependent on their parents, and they're not going to be successful because versus these other kids who have slowly been taking on more responsibilities each grade year of high school, where they know how to use a washer and a dryer, they know how to use a crock pot, that type of thing. So overall, they become dependent on the gaming, they struggle with independence, and eventually struggle in college. And so I see some more questions are coming in. How does this relate to the video games offered by the school as educational academic tools? So I'm not 100% aware of what the schools are offering. I assume that they're probably on a more like low key level where there are some video games that can be helpful. Like I remember, I don't know if y'all know about this, but when I was in third grade, was it third grade? I don't know. Like Made Us Beacon was the was a computer game that we'd go and do, and it was a typing game. Games that aren't requiring that hyper focus and that puts you into your fight or flight. So
So,
and low dopamine, so like I assume that the schools, yeah, games are low dopamine, aren't putting you in fight or flight, aren't requiring that hyper focus. So I don't think that those would be rewiring their brain in a negative way. And so is the same type of behavior and addiction linked to general screen time? To a certain extent, yes, yes, yes. Because if the kids are watching violent things on the screen, then that is going to increase violent behaviors too. Like I remember when Squid Games came out, and I do talk therapy with kids like around 8 to college age, and the amount of 12-year-olds that were coming in and talking to me about Squid Games, my jaw was just to the floor because these kids are getting exposed to such violent behavior, and their brain development does not interpret it the same way that our brains can, and it is influencing them. And the same thing with screen time. um, I know that I don't really know everything off the top of my head of like what shows are good versus not, but even shows can wire kids' brains in social media to have ADHD because, like TikTok, you're getting dopamine hit with every video, and videos are usually sometimes 60 to 90 seconds long. The screens for movies are constantly changing now too. So like Cocomelon is an example of a show that I think is kid friendly because the scene is lasting a lot longer, like a certain amount of seconds before it changes.
if they email me, I can send the preferences
Okay.
on that.
Yes, and so for the sources for the violent behavior, I will put in your email. Wait, an email right now. Dr. On said that he will send it out, but I need to spell his email correctly. Dr. On at agentbraincenter.com. Okay, so I'm almost wrapping up my presentation, and we will have a lot of time for questions because I feel like that's the really fun part. So Dr. Ron and his other expert on video games, Emma Barr, made this red flags for video game addiction. So if you are worried that your kid may already be addicted, or if you just want to save this for your records for the future, these are some things that you can assess. First, their sleep quality. Are they not waking up rested? They might be sneaking away and getting on screens. Maybe. Does your child not want to participate in family functions anymore? Are they wanting to do the games instead? Is there increased conflict when you're telling them to turn off the games? Or is your child increasingly isolating and staying buried in the games? Is their immune system? Are you seeing changes there where there's increased illnesses or allergies? Is your child having a hard time connecting to other kids? And then their grades. Has there been a decline in grades since their gaming has increased? So, a therapeutic takeaway, we want to look for the root cause of the issue. Why are they playing video games so much? Are they using it as a coping tool? Are they looking for social connection? Maybe they need to be involved in more things after school or on weekends. Maybe they need to be introduced to some other potential hobbies. Maybe it's a need for connection. Or is it escapism gone wrong? Are they trying to get away from something stressful in their life? Do they not know how to have other tools to manage their anxiety or depression? So in these cases, we could look at talk therapy. Um, I work with kids all the time on developing better stress management tools, talking back to anxiety or depressive thoughts. Here at our center, if you feel like your kid has ADHD, if you're seeing those symptoms come up, we can do an EEG and see, is there that excessive frontal and excessive theta in their frontal lobes? And then if so, we can do neurofeedback brain training to lower the theta and thus lower symptoms. We've also found that gut zoomers is another treatment that we'll refer to in these gamers because their gut tends to be out of whack, and we know about the gut brain connection. And I just wanted to highlight the value system here of smart families. Prioritize your family and your values. I said at the beginning of the presentation, it's so important to talk to your kids about what your family values are around screens and video games, and why. Talk about the dopamine, talk about the effects, talk about, the failure to launch cases, and how that relates to your values. Because if the kids have buy-in, they're more likely to do it. If you just say, you have to listen to me, like we have to turn video games off after 30 minutes just because I said so, they're not going to have buy-in. They're going to feel like they have less control, and it's going to create more like defiant behaviors. Also delaying smartphones until high school, delaying social media until 16, and no phone use in school. I'm pretty sure this is my last slide. If you all just want to take a picture of this is some suggested rating I have for parents. If this kept your attention and you want to learn more, these are some great books that talk about screen times. They have a lot of statistics and references for things I've talked about too. And especially the last one at the end, it talks to how you can talk to your kids about these behaviors. The anxious generation, wow, that one blew my mind. It has a lot of statistics on how ever since social media screens have been introduced, how mental health in these kids and teens have dramatically declined. Um, and then now we have time for questions. Here's a QR code if you want to scan that, that can give you a link to our YouTube, our website, other resources we have about things that we do. But yeah, I'll start taking some questions. I see another comment here.
That's just about the plannings. Maybe not.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay.
Picture and I'll go back and we can do questions.
Okay. Okay, I see a hand raised. Iso?
Yes. So I wanted to know, how do you handle the kids, or how do you respond to kids when all their friends have games and you're trying to push back on them having games, but then they see all their friends and you just don't know how to find that balance? Just
Yeah,
because it's tough when their friends are talking about the games and then they get to school and they just feel left out.
that is such a valid question. Can I ask how old your kid is?
He's 10. He's in fourth
10?
grade and he's 10, yeah.
Okay. So this is such a hard part of parenting, because we hate the feeling of our kids being left out. We don't want them to feel like lonely or rejected or like they're missing out. And so I think that how you can handle this conversation is where you can start off saying like, hey, like we're going to have like a family discussion around values. And if you haven't done this before, you could, talk about, hey, like, this could be like this might be new, this might be weird, but I've been learning a lot of things, and um, it's really important to have a family value system so that we can reach our goals, be a family unit. And so start off, then you talk about games and say like, so, I've been learning some new things about gaming. There's some like, research coming out, and we need to reassess how often we game. And then that's whenever you can start, you want to include them into the conversation as much as possible. You don't want to just feel like, you're giving a presentation to them. Just be like, start asking them like, what are your thoughts on gaming? Do any of your friends have limits on games? And then you can start bringing up some things, so, you know, gaming, excessive gaming can rewire your brain and your dopamine levels so that it can cause attention issues, impulsivity, and you can explain what those are. And then you could say, as a family, we need to come up with a system of how much, time we can game. And then that you can ask them, like, what do you think is an appropriate amount of time to game? And then they might give theirs. You can, respond to them. And whenever kids are giving their opinions, you want to validate what they're saying, because you can validate what they're saying without agreeing with it. Because if they give their opinion and then you just immediately like squash it, then that's going to make them feel unheard. So try to find validating, language like, thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate to hear your opinion. I want to share what I've been reading and then, give your response there. And then depending on their age, I like to put, especially with like, teenagers, is, why don't you go do some research and then you can come back to me? Because if they're saying, well, I think it's okay to play, for 3 hours, you can say, okay, well, let's do some research and show me what can back up what you're saying. And then go from there. Is that helpful?
Yes, very helpful. Thank you so much.
That was
Thank
super
you.
helpful. Yeah, I have to say, just hearing like almost like a little script, I
Right.
think is really helpful for parents, even though the knowledge is in the back of our head, it just hearing it kind of set out in that format was so helpful. So thank you
Yes.
for that.
Thank you.
And I got a little bit of input on that. One of the things that um, children, especially boys, do is love to press their limits. If you say 1 hour, they're going to press it for an hour and 15 or an hour and 30. They'll keep doing it. And the best thing that parents can do about anything involved with their children is to set solid boundaries and don't move the boundaries. Because if you do, I'll give you an example. I got a little kitten about 15 years ago, and the middle of the night, this cat got up and jumped in the middle of my chest, and I knew what she wanted. She wanted me to get up and feed her. Well, I got up, went to the door, shut the door, and went back to bed. I said, that's not going to, you can't mess with me like that, cat, because if I'd have fed her, she would have continued that behavior. So you have to put solid boundaries up. And when the kids get into the late adolescent years, and they're constantly have been pushing those limits, the parents that parents' job is not to make your kids happy. Your job is to help prepare them for adulthood, help
Mm,
launch them. And so when I talk to a teenager, 13, 14, 16-year-old, and I say, what do you think about leaving home when you get out of high school? Well, I'm fine here. That's not good. If they say, I can't wait to leave this house and no rules, parents, you've done a great job. So that's because they're going to have to figure out how they're going to support themselves. So in the bigger picture, solid boundaries are really, really key. And don't keep moving the boundaries, because every time you do, they'll keep pressing their luck,
So
especially
true.
boys.
yeah.
So
Thank
true.
you.
If kids
Yeah.
know that they can push your boundaries, then they're gonna do that. So it's like once you have that family value system, which I even say like write it out and have the visual, um, then like it's written on paper and you really can't budge from that. And Dr. Crystal Collier, I know she's done some presentations and I think she has a book on how to create a family code. She's really great at that. Um, I see one comment says, how about making video games? I definitely think that that's a great idea. Coding, I mean, that's big right now. And if they could be on the other side of things, that's great. That's the great side. The other side of the spectrum, which I actually heard this from Dr. Crystal Collier. She was saying how what's even worse than kids playing video games is them just being on YouTube and watching someone else play. So, I like that the coding is on the opposite spectrum of that. And then someone else said, what would be the right balance between letting them be part of this new digital era and not disconnecting them from real life since the world is clearly moving in that direction? And I think that that's a really good point. And I get this question a lot, and it's always kind of tricky because there's not like a black and white answer. I would say that well, obviously it depends on the day because if they're so I really wouldn't recommend video games during the school week, maybe like a little bit if you want to use that as some motivation. I feel like there's a balance, but you just want to make sure that their responsibilities are done first. Sometimes what I see a lot with parents is, and I get it with kids, like you want to play video games right away when you get home because your brain has been on all day, but it can be really tricky 'cause once your brain is stuck in that dopamine um loop, it's hard to get out of it. And then it can cause a lot of emotional dysregulation. So, and then it's tricky because you don't want to play video games right before bed either because it's very overstimulating. So, if you are able to find a balance for the games in between responsibilities and bed, then do it. When it comes to the weekends, when they have more free time, you want to make sure that it's balanced with other things, like with physical activity, maybe another hobby. I really, I know with littles, there's a recommendation of no screens over 30 minutes. Once they start to get a little bit older, I know games or sometimes like need like 45 minutes, but I would never really suggest playing those games that require the hyper focus and the fight or flight like more than 45 minutes, like not like where they're doing it like for 3 hours on end. So if they are like wanting to play video games for a day, like break it up with some physical activity, going on a walk or something like that.
I just
And then-
wanted to pop in on that question and answer right there and just let you guys know that the students, as part of Smart Families programs, they receive presentations as well. And so they're gonna, if they haven't already, received App Trap. And so we teach them about the brain balance rule in that presentation. And then also for Smart Families, we have a family code night where we're all gonna go to the school and we'll feed you guys dinners and provide dinner and give a little presentation, and we'll kind of walk you guys through creating your own family code. So you'll outline your values with your child, engage them in conversation, and that will be the perfect segue to kind of talk, have these conversations like Alexandra was saying.
That's awesome.
Just to let you guys know, I did a study it's been several years ago now, but about male success rate in college. And since the advent of video games, 1994, the graduation rates from 1981 to 1994 were pretty much 50-50, 50% females, 50% males. In 94, when Mortal Kombat came out, they dropped significantly. Now the graduation rate from males to females, although there's an equal number are enrolled, the graduation rates are now down to about 38% males compared to the females. And so that's and it's because, and I think we're losing that part of our generation of the ones that are most addicted to the games are the ones that usually are the socially awkward kids that really don't have many friends. And finally, parents are so happy that they've got something to make their children happy. But these would have been the engineers and the mathematicians and the inventors. But when they get into the games, that instant gratification, they don't make it in college. They wash out pretty quick. And I with my 20, 30-year career doing this, I know many young guys that went off to college and couldn't regulate. Now they're permanent fixtures in their parents' home. And we read stories about that all the time. So really, truly, the males that would have been wonderful engineers and scientists, I think, are the ones that we're losing right now to the games, and that's sad. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you.
I have a quick question.
So-
Okay.
Okay, so my question isn't necessarily about gaming, it's still screen time. I know lately the kids, I know back in my era, we used to watch, some kids are doing everything on the phone. And so what I've noticed about my son, he scrolls on YouTube. And so what I'm concerned about is his level of obviously his attention. But I don't know that he could sit down and watch a movie because it's just video to video to video. So I guess my question is, how do we kind of slow that down? And it's not even, these are, what do they call them?
Shorts.
They're not shorts, yes. So they're not even videos. So they're not even that long. So how do we kind of combat that at home? Because I do worry that it will kind of speed them up.
Yes, what you're experiencing, I actually experienced that with TikTok. I noticed that at nights I was choosing TikTok more than my shows because one show seemed more of a commitment, or it just seemed like almost like more boring. Because with and like YouTube Shorts, it's like you might get something funny one moment and then something serious, and like you're all over the place, and it is rewiring our brains. And as a society, I am just so curious of where we're going to be at in 10 years because we're all doing this to our brains. And so I had to do this for myself. I had to set time limits on my TikTok because it goes by so fast, and I was not wanting to do that to my brain. And so those shorts, it is going to the same thing with the dopamine. And so I think that like, I don't know, Ashley, if y'all have more specifics on this, but what I work with parents is like when it comes to those just like scrolling like 15 minutes and then stop, because when it's prolonged, it is rewiring the brain. So it's like, yeah, you maybe don't want to just like completely take it away from him. But have that conversation with him, like I was mentioning earlier, and saying, because of this, it's like we really need to cut down because we need to make sure that your attention skills are, sharp and set you up to be successful.
Yes, that's exactly what we hone in with the kids too and the parents. We tell them set a timer, like you said, and also accountability. Like don't just set a timer, but like tell someone in your household who has a fully developed frontal, because sometimes they'll ignore the timer. So there's the accountability piece, and then just sharing with them exactly like the science and the brain balance rule. Do something else, and then do something that you're going to build skills on. If you don't use the skills, you're going to lose them. So while scrolling is fun and entertaining, it's like you're just building a skill for that, and not communication and hockey, if that's what your sport is or whatever.
Thank you.
Was someone else wanting to ask a quick question earlier?
Yes, that's me. Thank you. I came in 10 minutes late, so I didn't get the introduction. I apologize. Um, I heard that you offer presentations for the family. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I think Ashley was talking about in more depth. I'm always happy to give presentations too.
Yes.
Yeah, so from my side, I mean, I will give presentations on how the brain and video games impact the brain and the body and some other topics.
Okay. And my other question is, I know you mentioned the games that are more related to, or more violent games, shooting, but what about like Animal Crossing or Minecraft? I know that's still screen time, but are those a little bit friendlier?
Yeah, it's Sing and Minecraft, they aren't as like they're not requiring this hyper focus. They don't tend to put you in fight or flight. So they're not, rewiring your brain as much the level as the other games are. I would still put screen, restrictions, because it's still a screen and you want to, like Ashley was saying, balance it with other things that can give you other skills.
Sure.
But yeah, with those games, they are more on the mild side.
Well, another point to be made is the kids, COVID was terrible for the children because it took them away from face-to-face integration with their friends. And now, children, as you've been hearing, the generation going into the workforce, they have no skill sets for talking to other kids because they haven't spent time. So the more time they spend doing something like that, the less time they're spending with face-to-face contact with real kids our age. I can't believe that they'll sit across the table from each other and they'll be texting. And even I hired a young little therapist once upon a time, and she was deathly afraid of talking to people on the phone because she never talks to people on the phone. She only texts. And that's a skill set we need if we want to be successful in this life, is how do we interact with other humans. And so the more time they spend in the phones, in the social media, in TikTok, whatever, the less time they're spending building those skill sets during the formative years that they need in order to how to relate to other people, not just their own peers, but older and younger people as well.
Yes. Yeah. And will this presentation be recorded? I know that AI said there's going to be notes. Okay.
Yes, we're recording the presentation, and then we will post it onto our website under online presentations, and then you'll be able to get it from there and share it with others as well.
Thank you.
Well, one thing that I can add is the reason video games are more desirable to males than females is because males have a 14% larger amygdala, so they actually get more of a rush to play the games than females do. So there is a biological reason for that as well. It's not just the testosterone, it has to do with the amygdala itself and how it responds to the game. So, I think that's why, historically, males have been the fighters and women have been the communicators. Well, there's a reason for that. Men get more of a rush and we can't communicate worth a darn. Any more questions out there?
I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. I just wanted to say thank you guys for, bringing attention to this issue that some of us, struggle with, and some people may not even know that's an issue. So it's imperative that we continue to take care of these kids' mental health.
I agree. And I thank y'all for being interested in this. The fact that, y'all are attentive to this and want to, learn more about it and implement it in your lives says a lot about, y'all's care for your kids.
Absolutely. And thank you, Alexandra and Dr. Ron, for sharing your insight. It's always super helpful. So we're so appreciative for your time. And thank you guys all for joining.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anybody wants any presentations on anything, we're always available and would love to do it. So you pick a topic and I'm sure we can come up with something. We used to do this discussions with Dr. Ron for years during COVID when people were doing those kind of things. And we've talked about ADHD, autism. We talked about medications. We talked about abnormal behavior and what to do with it. And then now we're getting more so into how the mold affects kids and how I've found children right now with heavy metals and insecticides and herbicides and in their systems. And, we think it's all psychological, but, if we're not looking deeper, we may miss something very valuable in these children's diets. If you got a child that has a very restrictive diet, dysbiosis is a true diagnosis, and it's whether it could be from a leaky gut or anything. There's so many reasons for it, but that's why we've teamed up quite a bit with functional medicine doctors, because they will look deeper into it. And when we do an EEG, we can actually determine whether it's the problems that they're having is coming from below the neck or above the neck. So it's quite an interesting bunch of topics out there, but diet, exercise, sunshine, and sleep, the top four that are critical to a healthy lifestyle. And I don't know that we can all say that we have a healthy lifestyle.
Well, thank you all. We appreciate you.
One more thing, where can I find, I know that the QR code you shared, that will be also shared.
Put it back up if you want, Alexandra.
Please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That way you guys can take a picture and we'll leave it there until everybody shuts down.
Okay, sounds good. I will put this up.
There we go. Alexandra's a genius when it comes to QR codes. They're on their business card. I mean, the young population, you guys are great. Love it.
QR codes have been a blessing. Very helpful.